Well, welcome back to Zcon, everybody. We are now here for a governance panel with members of the Bootstrap and Zcash Foundation boards, plus Hudson Jameson, who, as you will know, served 1.5 terms on ZOMG and then the Zcash Community Grants Committee. Let's start off by giving everybody a chance to introduce themselves. I'll start off with myself. Hopefully you all know that I'm Jack Gavigan. I'm the Executive Director of the Zcash Foundation. I've been involved with Zcash since shortly before it launched back in 2016. I spent 4 years with the Electric Coin Company before moving over to take over as ED of the foundation early last year.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrew Miller. One of the founding board members of the Zcash Foundation and currently the board chair. I'm also a professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hudson Jameson. I, like Jack mentioned, served on the Zcash community grants up until recently. I've also done a lot of work in the Ethereum space involving a lot of protocol liaison and kind of coordination work in general.
Hi, I'm Amber Baldet. I'm on the Zcash Foundation board for a couple years now, and I'm co-founder of a startup called Clovyr.
Hello, I'm Alan Fairless. I was one of the seed investors to the Electric Coin Company. I had the opportunity to work with Zooko, Dara, and Nate before then, and was super happy to be involved. My background is in applied cryptography. I like burritos and deliver an above-average moonwalk.
Okay. That's going to happen. I'm Zooko. Among my other jobs, I serve on the board of the Bootstrap Foundation, and I'm the CEO of the Electric Coin Company.
And the person who put together the team that created Zcash.
Yeah, I pulled the team together.
Cool. Well, I thought I would start off by just for, in the context of governance, I thought that it would make sense to talk a little bit about the formal governance structures that are currently in place within the Zcash ecosystem. So I'm going to give a quick overview of those, and then if people feel that I've missed anything, they can jump in and fill in the gaps. But there are essentially two key documents, as it were, that formalize the governance structure for Zcash. The first one is the trademark agreement between the Electric Coin Company and the Zcash Foundation. Now, when Zcash was created, the Electric Coin Company very wisely decided to trademark the term and the logo in a whole bunch of countries worldwide. That has ensured that Zcash has been protected from scammers creating Zcash Classic or Zcash Private or whatever, multiple misleadingly branded cryptocurrencies or tokens or whatever you want to call them that could fool people into believing that they're the real Zcash. And it also has allowed both ECC and then subsequently the foundation to issue takedown notices against scams that you misuse the Zcash name or claim to be the genuine Zcash team. Now that trademark, those trademarks were registered, and the process of protecting them was started by the Electric Coin Company. And then a couple of years ago, the Electric Coin Company reached an agreement with the Zcash Foundation to transfer ownership of those trademarks to the foundation, and the foundation is now responsible for protecting those. That agreement is long, and it contains a lot of provisions, and it talks about how the trademark is to be used and who's required to enforce it, what the obligations are on both ECC and the Zcash Foundation. And one of the key things that it provides for is how to decide what blockchain gets called Zcash, and whether a network upgrade, which is effectively a potential hard fork, is valid or not. And the short description there is that both parties must agree that a network upgrade is valid in order for the post-network upgrade chain to be called Zcash. And if they don't agree on that, then that could lead to all sorts of issues, up to and potentially including Zcash effectively ceasing to exist and new names needing to be found for the two competing chains. But anybody who is interested or who has opinions on on Zcash governance should take the time to read that trading mark agreement. It can be found on both the ECC and the Zcash Foundation websites. The second important document that defines how Zcash is governed is ZIP 1014. And ZIP 1014 is the ZIP that described the dev fund. As many of you will know, when Zcash was launched, there was a founder's reward, which went to investors like Alan, employees of the Electric Coin Company like myself, and the founders of the Electric Coin Company, including the 7 scientists. That finished at the first halvening back in 2020, and during the course of 2019 and early 2020, there was a big discussion about whether the founder's reward should be replaced by something that would continue to provide and pay for ongoing research and development to support the Zcash protocol. And the outcome of a very long and exhaustive set of discussions and multiple rounds of voting was ZIP 1014, which created the dev fund. And the recipients of the dev fund are the Electric Coin Company, the Zcash Foundation, and then there is also a slice dedicated to what was called major grants and what we now call Zcash community grants. And that slice is administered by the Zcash Foundation, but the members of the Zcash Community Grants Committee, like Hudson used to be, are elected by the community through the Zcash Community Advisory Panel. Those funds that are set aside for major grants, the foundation administers them, but the foundation cannot spend them on its own cognizance, on its own work. They can only be spent on major grants that have been approved, accepted by that community panel, or sorry, by the Zcash Community Grants Committee, and that Community Grants Committee is entirely independent in terms of its decision making. We at the Zcash Foundation have got no right to suggest to them what they should or should not fund. The only exception is if they might be funding something that would jeopardize the foundation's 501c3 status or breach the law in some way, like, for example, in relation to sanctions, which is a topic which we've heard a bit about this during this conference. So that those two documents effectively constitute the formal Zcash governance structure as it exists today. Now, first of all, let me throw it out, and have I missed anything?
And then no, you haven't missed anything, except listening to that, I was thinking, and then there's the consensus rules, which give a bunch of coins to the miner with every block, and they give a few coins to the foundation, a few coins to Bootstrap, and a few more coins to the foundation to be put into the Zcash community grants bucket, right? And I was just thinking, hearing your accurate description of the formal documents, it's interesting, even if we all agreed to change that, we can't change the consensus rules. If Bootstrap and Zcash Foundation collectively agreed to change that and we didn't have preponderance of the network willing to go along with it, then our paper documents would not change the way those coins went. That's interesting.
Well, one provision in the trademark agreement, both the ECC and the Zcash Foundation commit to paying attention to or following the clear consensus of the Zcash community. How to assess what the clear consensus is not entirely clear, and various mechanisms have been used by various parties in the past. We at the Foundation, use the Zcash Community Advisory Panel as a means of doing that. But yeah, I mean, what you say is strictly true in the sense that anybody can run whatever software they want. However, if somebody wants to claim that the coins that are created by the software that they are running on the chain that they are mining against or otherwise reaching consensus on, then it needs to be using a set of consensus rules that have in effect been agreed by ECC and the foundation.
If they want to call it Zcash.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right,
But
right.
anybody can fork Zcash and create a separate chain and call it whatever they want and run whatever consensus rules they want.
Right. So the trademark agreement gives us collectively the power to assign the name to it or to peel the name off of it, but we can't actually unilaterally control the consensus rules. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I was thinking about in this is like, you mentioned the community, and that's a very loaded term a lot of the time, and it's like, who's the community? How do we gauge them? Things like that. And I feel like from what I've seen in other cryptocurrency communities, one thing that I feel like Zcash could do better about, and it's not something that like anyone messed up on, but I guess just like a transition as Zcash becomes an older and more mature cryptocurrency, is really pushing to get more organizations involved, and one huge step in that direction was the ZCG funding of Kedit to work on ZSA research. I feel that given Kedit's expertise, they would be a great voice. And to compare with like the Ethereum ecosystem where I'm very familiar with, we have many, many organizations that kind of chime in on what should be done, and it kind of does go all the way up to the devs at the time, or between liaisons who tell the devs what these big companies within Ethereum and devs and users want. And I don't see that structure in Zcash yet, but I think it's coming. I think it's going to be really great when that happens. And this is going to get maybe a little too off topic of governments, but I think the main way that's going to happen is the beginnings and the execution and programmability on Zcash, because that will invite users who don't have to care about privacy. They just want to do cool stuff. And of course, privacy is very important, but to sit and rely on convincing people privacy is so important that they abandon their really fun, cool DeFi blockchain to go to Zcash is just not practical for the growth of a blockchain.
Yeah.
I want to build on what you said a little bit. I think that there's a very fundamental tension. I think it's something that we deal with really explicitly, and it's the notion of making space for newcomers to come and participate, and also providing quality of action and leadership. Their intention, because the better job our existing established organizations do, forming strong ties with each other, expertise, having a history and a habit of delivery and doing well, it makes it harder for a non-incumbent to just show up. On the other hand, if we say, well, we're just going to do nothing, so there's plenty of blank space for someone else to come and fit, that would just be like a leadership vacuum. Maybe not much would get done. And I think it's a tension, but the way that we're overcoming it is by being fairly deliberate about creating these processes and spaces for new groups to join. I think the ZCG is, I think, the last iteration of a bunch of kind of steps towards this that have all been getting incrementally a lot better. The very first versions of these were like the very tiny baby grants that Zcash Foundation did in its very first year of operation. But the nature of them is that they're so small. They go to kind of ad hoc projects that come and go for a little bit. So the whole original name of major grants, and now what ZCG is doing is about how to get a bigger juggernaut of a team that's not just one random person, but rather a really effective team that maybe already has a habit of teamwork, already has a track record. But you need like a large stable grant program to provide the right kind of funding and stability for them to do. So I'm really excited that Kedit's been doing this. I think that ZCG's been doing a much better job of it. I do think that we could probably still find ways to do more, but that's the tension to do, is to both provide good leadership while also trying to bring in newcomers as well.
Yeah, and one of the challenges of grant funding is it's much easier to get grant funding to add a cool new feature that everybody's excited about versus the ongoing maintenance, migration, the user testing code, automation, the boring parts of programming, and yet we need those things. So, as we move over time, we need to create more space for other projects to join and make money from the project so that they can participate in those feedback loops.
Yeah, and it's worthwhile to also think about what exactly is it that we are governing. In one sense, it does have to do with the very explicit consensus rules and what we think of as this specific project. But what I like about the community grants program also is that it allows to have kind of a separate space where we can be more experimental and bring different organizations in. So while each organization like ECC, Bootstrap, and the Foundation might have our own kind of strategic objectives around what we think is the best way to provide a path to the future for Zcash and financial privacy in general, we also now have this kind of third path where we can do things like fund Tor or open privacy work, but more outreach that creates more connectivity and just expands the definition of what the overall community is.
Yeah, I think that the one of the great things that the community grant slice of the dev fund does is it removes this problem where you've got the established incumbent who has got their slice and has got their assured funding and is set up for the next 4 years plus to be able to have certainty about being able to receive funding to work on Zcash. For a new organization to come and join the party, as it were, without having any funding up front, is just a non-starter. They're just not going to do it. So having the ability to give a major $1 million more grant to an organization who have said, this is what we want to do, this is how it's going to contribute to Zcash. These are the milestones, so the risk is mitigated by having that. That's absolutely fantastic, because it then means that an organization like Kedit can come in, they can work on something like ZSAs. When they've completed it, they can say, right, we want to do more. We want to do programmability or pay the verification key or something like that. And over time, I think we're going to see organizations come in who are really contributing to Zcash, and by that I mean contributing to the technology, contributing to its functionality, making it more useful to end users, whether that's by creating wallets with good UX, whether it's adding new functionality to the protocol layer. And I think that in the future, it's no longer just going to be the two organizations that are represented here on stage, modulo Hudson. It's going to be hopefully organizations like Kedit getting involved, and potentially themselves, assuming that the community decides that the dev fund was a good idea and decide to continue it long term, them getting their own slice of the dev fund, and us moving into again a more decentralized structure.
One thought I had, as I've been talking to people at the conference, even before online, a lot of and this is inside and outside of Zcash, I've tried to kind of cast a net. A lot of what I hear is that if I go to Decred, if I go to SIA, if I go to Ethereum, there are directives, there's a roadmap, there's a timeline for both features and a direction besides just a goal or narrative, and that is missing in Zcash. So I kind of thought about it and looked around, and my initial reaction was like, who do I point the finger to who's not stepping up and leading here? But really, I think that's the wrong approach, because Zcash is just different. Zcash needs groups of people to collectively, almost like the DAO structures that Michael Llewellyn was presenting last talk, needs might have core working groups that all kind of in a DAO-like structure almost, but less decentralized because they're companies, come together and assign different things, and there doesn't have to be a Vitalik Buterin of Zcash necessarily. That wouldn't be bad or necessarily bad, but that's just not where we're at right now. And to get to that direction, I'm wondering what people on here think would be something that would, 2 years from now or 1 year from now, I talk to people outside of Zcash and they're like, yeah, I know what's going on. I know the direction Zcash is going in and what they want to accomplish.
I mean, we've worked on, it's a difficult thing to both remain decentralized and continually try to give away power and make sure that people feel included, while also saying, but here's what we're doing. And so I think we haven't done a great job. We've done a lot of gathering sentiment. We've done a lot of talking about here's the vision as we see it. There's tons of blogs on the Foundation site and on the ECC site about what projects we want to prioritize, the ordering of network upgrades, various things. But to kind of take the flip side of what's so great about the grants program, it also puts us in a position where we can get kind of insular about, well, here's what we want to do with our specific resources, which are resource constrained. And then if it's outside that purview, we want to punt it to the community. Like, wouldn't it be great if somebody just develops this other thing? And you can write a request for proposals for that. But I think a specific challenge of the Zcash community is that contributing here is harder than a lot of the other communities. There's a huge learning curve. The dev experience is not necessarily fantastic or easy. And because of that, there's a lot of open requests that we struggle to get filled. And maybe we should just take these back in-house. I don't know, but it's a challenge.
Yeah, it seems to me one of the limitations is not so much availability of funding as availability of qualified teams that are willing to take on a project. And to me that sounds like a traditional engineering recruitment problem that maybe we could use some of the traditional techniques of marketing to engineers, and at the same time maybe we could have grants that scale up our dev education infrastructure so that it is easier to onboard developers.
If only someone here was working on developer experience to learn. That's what I did. Sorry, continue.
I think that there's a somewhat more tolerance of kind of pluralities emerging in the cryptocurrency space in general that I think might kind of blend over into people, I guess, accepting the way that Zcash is different, like you're pointing out. In like the very first couple years of the Zcash Foundation, it was impossible to get anyone to understand that there are two separate entities. They would always like tweet at the Zcash Foundation to try to get a hold of Zooko, and vice versa. I think we did a bunch of things that were specifically designed to sort of make it more apparent that we're independent. I mean, I guess you might. So in 2 years, I hope that people can. I think as they have been increasingly, but can continue to recognize that there's space for multiple roadmaps. Hopefully, a lot of clarity on the essential shared parts that we have to work together on. But once you go from once you can understand that there's room for multiple developer organizations in there, I think it's going to be easier to bring on the next. I think like the interaction that we have with Kedit, as successful as that can be, I think that can also be like a nice signpost to other developer organizations to get involved as well.
Yeah, on the roadmap thing, actually, in my 360 review earlier this year, there was a similar sort of criticism that I don't necessarily lay out what the roadmap is specifically for Zebra in that case. And for my part, I'm reluctant to do that because things change so quickly in this space. If I were to say, right, we're going to do this is the roadmap for the next 18 months, then in 3 months' time something might come along and change things where I go, right, we have to throw that out and start again. So my kind of mindset, and this has been throughout my career, is to say, right, these are our high-level goals. So, for example, we want to get Zebra to be, near feature complete function. My little son is at the back. He's giving me away from the door. We want to get Zebra to be feature complete. The order in which, those features come, is up for debate, and we chose, for example, light wallet D functionality initially because we thought that was important. Similarly, the longer the overall goal, I think, in my mind, and so far the board has indulged me in this, is programmability. But I think it would be inappropriate at this point to say that it's going to happen on this date or by this time, or it's going to look exactly like this. To my mind, there are a series of steps, and the Zebra is part of that, getting Zebra to the point where it can become a platform for deploying that functionality. So I guess, on the one hand, I can totally understand the frustration of people, both in the community and who are thinking of joining the community, where they don't see a roadmap. They're like, well, what's Zcash about? We know what it is today. What's it going to be tomorrow? They're working on a few different things, but where is it going in the long term? But part of me also thinks that there's an advantage to being to not announcing things that we're not necessarily going to deliver, not announcing vaporware, you know, and kind of under-promising and over-delivering. But I'm interested in hearing other thoughts, because it's something that I genuinely grapple with, you know.
Yeah, I would say, like, from my experience with Ethereum, because I did communications for the Ethereum Foundation and community management for like a long time. And what I would do is, we kind of started having this thing, and you'll see it even today, we don't put dates on our roadmap. And even when we do, we don't, like EF or whoever is like in charge, quote unquote, like consensus, et cetera, we have developers who just say what dates they think it is, and then people coalesce around it. And it's super chaotic, and it makes a lot of people upset, and then a lot of news media doesn't understand why we keep changing the date every year, and then POS takes 5 years. But anyways, I would say that, yeah, basically a good compromise would be a living document that shows the high level and the specifics and says, this is a living document, this is a hackMD, this is something where if you're interested in the developer, where we're going, like, we're not going to say we're going to finish this by 18 months or yada yada. You could even put rough dates and say, depending on what happens, that'll change. Because this kind of also goes into the like point of, for both ECC and ZF, you mentioned, Amber, that there's resource constraints on what they're doing, and there's also internal company goals, because ECC is a for-profit business. So they need to balance. Kind of.
Not really.
Oh, Bootstrap has you now, right?
So yeah. ECC is structured like a business. Like, I'm the CEO, and there are other members in these like hierarchical teams and all that.
Gotcha.
But ECC is wholly owned by Bootstrap, which is a nonprofit. So any money that ECC makes can only be used by Bootstrap for its public good mission.
That's interesting. I wish I would have known that before.
And the board manages it like a nonprofit.
Yeah, that's awesome then. So yeah, but either way, the thing still applies that you have resource constraints for your internal goals, yet you're needing to listen to the community, and then it's hard to figure out where that flow of information comes from, because I could name like 6 Zcash silos right now between Discord, Slack, Twitter, Telegram, and a few others. So like, yeah, how does ZF and Bootstrap ECC, in your opinions, manage gauging the community sentiment for roadmaps with also what your internal goals are?
Well, I have kind of a meta comment on that. So if we were contrasting Zcash to, say, a traditional tech startup, one of the parts of the feedback loop that's sort of missing is end-user support and end-user interactions.
Yeah.
And you know, we heard from Josh Swihart that there's pretty good data that suggests that there's tens of millions of Zcash users worldwide. And if you contrast that to, you know, even across the silos, how many accounts are active in all those places? So one of the things I was super excited to hear from Jack on the opening note is interest in a Zcash general support functionality to support end users and help us bring that feedback loop in-house.
Yeah, we need to just finalize that job description. We'll get it out as soon as I've recovered from the jet lag when I return home.
And in Josh Swihart's presentation about that, he called it Zec UX as governance, which I thought was a really neat connection between like tech support and market research and all these traditional product functions, and that as being a source of information that affects governance.
Another really cool feature, ZSAs come out. You have a ZSA if you use a wallet for a long enough period of time using local private data, the ZSA gets to you, and then you use the ZSA as an entry token to do feedback, maybe for Zec. So these use cases for ZSAs are going to explode.
The more functionality we add to Zcash as a platform, the more flexibility we have to do stuff like that.
Yeah,
but sorry, go ahead.
Well, just not to be a little bit spicy, I guess, but I think we do need more clarity around specifically what the roadmap features are going to be. And I remember back in 2016, I think I saw Liz Stark. I've always remembered this. She was on this panel about Lightning, and somebody was like, "Oh, this sounds amazing. You know, when is it coming out?" She's like, 5 years. And everybody groaned because they're like, "But we want all these things now. Why isn't it in 18 months?" Like, and she's like, "I don't know what the plan is for the whatever, but we'll be done in 5 years. Like, check back." And damned if they didn't deliver in exactly 5 years. So I think that there's a balance between saying we're going to do this exact thing over the next 6 months or the 24 months and lay everything out and hit every interim milestone, as much as saying we are so committed to this that we can guarantee you that, for example, ZSAs is going to be our priority for the next major period of time. And that gives people confidence that they can begin to build on things that are in that direction or think about use cases. So there's a degree that like the wind won't change, and a commitment to delivery even if it's longer term. So it's kind of the same thing with Casper and some of the POS stuff, although it was much more like, it was worse that they said 2 years, like 4 times in a row.
Yeah, well,
that's worse.
With the IP 1559, which was a fee market change, that took longer than we thought, but that was actually good because we needed all the wallets to have months to prepare because it was a drastic economic and UX change for users that required a ton of research, a ton of development and testing, and a full economic analysis by Tim Roughgarden. So like the fact that they said this is our priority and we don't have a timeline, exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Do you think that there's any downsides to stating milestones and missing them? I mean, I'm not sure what the
No
costs
downside
are
in blockchain to missing milestones. Everyone forgives you and forgets because the news cycle is so quick, and it's understandable because we're bleeding edge technology. In Ethereum's case, moving fast and breaking things. In Zcash's case, I hope it speeds up, and I think it will.
I want to touch on something about, I think it was Hudson mentioned about, getting input from the community about what the roadmap should be. And I want to, to turn a little bit of the discussion towards how the two organizations are governed. So the Zcash Foundation is a 501c3. It's a US-based company that has nonprofit status, and it is governed by a board of directors. There are 5 independent directors plus myself. We have, since very early on, when I say we, I mean it was actually Andrew who really got the ball rolling. But the foundation has, since quite early on, sought community input on who should be on the board of the foundation. And we do that by consulting with the Zcash Community Advisory Panel. It's about 100 plus people who we invite to vote privately on a range of issues, including what they believe the priorities should be for Zcash. So through that, and it is at arm's length, they are effectively suggesting that we put people on the board of the foundation, and we then assess whether to accept that recommendation or to make a different decision. But there is a mechanism there for the community to indirectly impact what the priorities of the foundation are. And as I said, so far the foundation board has been comfortable to at least nod and smile when I talk about programmability. But yeah, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about having more direct input or having more binding input. One of the reasons that the foundation does not commit itself absolutely to following what the Zcash Community Advisory Panel recommends is because ultimately the board members have fiduciary and legal responsibility for the actions of the foundation. Yeah, there is definitely a mechanism there for receiving input, but I wonder if the board has any opinions about how we could improve that, or how we could improve that general overall process.
I have a mini rant I think might help the framing, but many things are spectrums and not binaries. I think the nature of binding in the context of the advisory panel being binding kind of fits onto there. We can't abdicate our responsibility as board members. That's why we retain that kind of final ratification ability. But the whole point in the structure of it is that the ZCAP's input is a seriously weighted and important input. I think Michael Llewellyn gave some terms to this that it would and should be shocking to the community if there was a clear output on a decision we had put to the ZCAP to provide input on. It would look absolutely terrible for us to just disagree with it. It would at least require us to explain our rationale in public really clearly, and the rest of the community would have to judge whether it was appropriate to do. So I think we can talk in terms of more binding, as the phrase you said, less binding, and I'm not sure all the elements that go into that, but it's a spectrum, and it's the ZCAP has significant weight for us.
Yeah, and I like that we are explicit and transparent about how it is there is a little wiggle room, and we do have these obligations, and we're not trying to say it's something that it's not. We're not saying, oh, this is a DAO, but then at the end of the day, you got to go do something because of legal requirements, and like it's actually a completely different enforcement mechanism in practice. And just saying that like the community has a priority is just such a wildly troublesome statement, because there's just so many different groups with different priorities. And what happens if, one quarter, there's just very clear signaling from one corner of the community that this is very important to us, and they, do a campaign to make sure that it really gets through and really gets high. But then the very next one, we get an almost mutually exclusive trend from people with different opinions and different priorities. We can't change execution paths based on that. And one of the things that we struggle with or constantly trying to improve even between our organizations is how to make sure that we're not accidentally or even knowingly working on things that might end up being at cross purposes just because we think that they solve the same problem but maybe in different ways. So I think it's important that we listen to the sentiment, which we definitely do, and we could do a better job more explicitly reaching out and polling more stakeholder organizations, which we've actually just talked about this week as implementing. But it's really easy to sit on Twitter and say, why don't they just do what the community wants? It's a lot harder to do it in practice.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, particularly when there's no objective definition of what the electorate might be for this governance structure, and our technology sort of makes that by design.
I guess there have been a lot of DAOs that are experiments in the crypto space outside of Zcash, which are doing the opposite, where the 100 people do get the final binding decision. And I always thought that was a bad idea. And so far, it looks like it's a bad idea, right? Those things are not working very well, are they?
No, I mean, like, it depends on what decisions they're making, but yeah, there's always the chance for vote buying, Sybil attacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, having a binding vote would be a bad idea. In fact, my general recommendation is that when you're a smaller cryptocurrency project, have someone who's kind of taking charge and, doing a lot of the leadership stuff, have them fizzle out over time like Vitalik's influence has fizzled out, and then have people that are community liaisons. So I was a community liaison since 2016 to 20 whatever at the Ethereum Foundation, and then when I left, I was replaced by two people, Tim Byko and Trent Van Epps. Tim runs the core developer call, which is like the arborist call, but for Ethereum. And then Trent goes and he has side meetings with major dApps, miners, stakers, every type of user in Ethereum, and then brings that to our version of the arborist call. So there's now a flow of information, and if you're in the community, you can just hit up Trent if you have an idea. And you'd think everyone would do that, but people are lazy, so we really get good, clear feedback. And same with me. People still DM me because they think I work at the EF still, and I'm just like, pass it to Trent. So I feel like we're missing that here. And I think one thing that is kind of cool, though, is Dan has started to play that role a bit from the Zcash Foundation. I've been really impressed with what he's been doing.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, we hired Decentralist Dan, who's been a member of the forums for a few years, member of the Zcash community. We opened up an ecosystem relations manager role, and we had a bunch of applicants. One of them was Decentralist Dan, and we hired Dan, and he's been doing fantastic work supporting the Zcash Community Grants Committee, and also beginning that process of starting to reach out and start to build better relationships with the existing and potential, I think, members of the Zcash ecosystem. And that's something that I think we're gonna start to formalize a little bit. The boards discussed that yesterday morning about having a sort of a stakeholder engagement mechanism for, particularly for people who are currently, running projects like wallets that have a key role to play in the Zcash ecosystem. And in time, I think it might be worth looking to expand that to also potential members. But let's take it one step at a time, I think.
My turn for a spicy take. So Zcash should get more decentralized, like we talked about at the beginning. And organizations just naturally hold on to money and power. They don't just naturally give it away. So it's going to require intentionality on the part of the Zcash community. And it's a long-term process. It will probably take, previously you said to create that one product, it took 5 years. Well, hopefully we could decentralize Zcash governance more in, let's say, 2 years. but only if there's a collective intention and plan for how to do that. The advantage, so I said organizations don't naturally give away money or power. That's definitely true. For one thing, they're way too busy doing their thing, right? But that there's an advantage for the Zcash community is that the Zcash Foundation and Bootstrap are both organizations that have a really strong culture and commitment to honoring the larger community. And so if the larger community consistently, strongly signaled that increased decentralization was important to them, based on my knowledge of both organizations would absolutely support that. It would still take years and it still requires prioritization. And the spicy part is, the new, more decentralized parts of Zcash really need to be outside USA.
You've talked about this in the past. Do you want to explain why?
Well, I mean, so the immediate, yes, I've been saying this consistently for many years, yes, because I thought something was going to happen like what happened yesterday. But I think the USA has a lot going for it in terms of a home for governance. It has a lot of rule of law and protections and processes that are useful and good for our purposes. But the Zcash community shouldn't have all its eggs in one basket. That's why.
That's a really good point. I also wanted to say on the whole decentralizing over time, I have a funny story. The original founders of Ethereum, many of them truly believed that after Ethereum's launch in 2016, the Ethereum Foundation and all the funds could be converted entirely to a DAO, an on-chain DAO, within 2 years. Now, the Ethereum Foundation, from my understanding, yeah, that is hilarious, actually. It's crazy.
With hindsight.
In hindsight, it's awful. So now the Ethereum Foundation acts as primarily a grant-giving and support organization, and Aya Miyaguchi, the executive director, has done multiple speeches taking steps to say, we are stepping back. We are here for support. We are here to build up leaders in the space. We're here to make connections. We're not here to make decisions. And that's been shown time and time again when, like, things that Vitalik hasn't agreed with, and also the fact that, like, everybody, or all the teams at the EF, it's kind of disorganized, but, like, they have such autonomy. The executive director and the operations team has zero idea guess the roadmap, and they never have input into it, which is very different than what I see where a lot of people like Zooko and Nate and people who are higher roles within the organization seemingly have more, like, not more say, but a lot of say in here's the direction we're going, instead of me seeing a developer come up and say here's the direction we're going. Yeah. I think that would be good for optics, number one, but also just for spreading out that influence.
So to circle back to what we...
Well, my quick spicy take on decentralization is that the limiting factor isn't the attitudes of the two nonprofits, it's the availability of other high quality parties and participants in the ecosystem.
I agree.
And the solution to that is to keep being more cool and to keep being attractive and bring more people in and all those things.
And that's what Zip 1014 said was the rationale for the Zcash community grants. The purpose of that slice was to attract new teams to, like, permanently join the Zcash ecosystem. So that's probably the process by which this will work, is that teams come in through Zcash community grants, and then they upgrade to peers of Zcash Foundation and Bootstrap.
Yeah.
I Zcash pilled a Solana dev this morning and got him in here. Let's get more.
There's a point I want to make. Earlier on we were talking about the balance between having these two organizations, who currently have all the money and power, and that reluctance to give it up, I've been, it's been suggested to me that the foundation and me have been, reluctant to allow more power to emerge because we want to keep that power for ourselves. But I think there's a difference between wanting to retain control versus wanting to protect something. And I feel like there are a lot of people who, when they see something like Zcash that is successful, where there's a lot of funds available, they're like, let's go and get some of that. And I think that it's our responsibility, both ECC Bootstrap and the foundation, to ensure that Zcash can continue to grow and flourish without being subject to capture or without being subject to exploitation by people whose interests aren't necessarily aligned with the overall goals of Zcash, but are more selfish.
Let me say something about the flip side of that real quick. I think when new teams approach the community, I think the community should, like at the first glance, like the first presumption should be that these are good guys who are on our side. And that's because I've seen multiple times that teams of skilled players could make more money elsewhere. And Zcash has this unique competitive advantage versus all of the other more well-funded and more prominent coins that skilled people decide to make less money because they love our mission and they want to join our community. So the presumption should be, we're looking for those people. They're probably here for good reasons.
I see
Agreed.
we're kind of at time here, but I just wanted to tag one thought onto that. I think it's worth recognizing the work that you did initially to make sure that the foundation was created, and saying that organizations don't want to give away power. This is something I've just always considered to be axiomatic, and it was truly an impressive mission and lift to ensure that you actually did that, and basically created a bunch of people who can argue with you all the time. And so it can be done through will, through intention. It's great. This is not a cautionary tale. This is like a tale of a success story, even though now, we do argue sometimes. But the cautionary tale, if anybody remembers what Blockstack did a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden one day there's a blog of we're now 5 different organizations in order to decentralize ourselves, very intentionally, but all at once. And it created a whole bunch of overhead, and we need to be thoughtful and cautious about how we iteratively move forward in governance transition.
Thank you for seeing that, Amber. And I've got to say, Jack, Andrew, and Alan, and me, and a bunch of others donated to form the Zcash Foundation in 2017.
Yeah. It's probably worth recognizing that Zooko and his colleagues in Least Authority donated the vast majority of the funds that we are still spending today at the foundation. So it's Zooko. Has the foundation developed as you hoped it would?
I would have been happy to see the foundation deploy something to users earlier and start a feedback loop. They've been doing these things which are really great quality things, but they're still not getting information back from users even yet today. And I would have been interested to see the foundation do something else, I don't know, think outside the box, not be a software organization or something else. It's better than it was when we had only one organization. And the boards and the employees of the foundation are super great. It's an example of that thing that we can attract really great people who are not mercenaries but patriots.
We're going to have to finish it there. You'll notice that we haven't answered any questions. And the reason for that is that in a few minutes' time, we'll all be back up here, hopefully with Peter van Valkenburg, if he isn't trying to deal with this whole OFAC situation. But we'll all be back here to answer questions that have been submitted on the Zcash community forums, and we're going to be answering the most upvoted questions. So come back to us in about 5 minutes, and you'll hear us answering the community's questions then.